The Mental Health Show with Mark Aiston.
I know that, I know most of you who are listening who know of me would know that I'm very passionate about it, mental health and addiction. Graeme Cowen runs a company called Factor C, and I'm going to get him to explain fundamentally what that business does. But as I explained before, having a look at a very impressive front page of his website, well, it's one of those sort of scroll down websites where everything's right there. If you just keep sort of scrolling down, it's got some tabs up the front. But training to build a mentally health workplace, and I know that that's such an important thing, and I'm very passionate about that. Graeme, welcome. How are you?
Very well, thanks, Mark. Lovely to join you.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. How long have you been... Oh, by the way, do you like Dancing Queen?
I do love it. I watched Mamma Mia a couple of weeks ago. And,
did you?
Yeah, lovely to see that.
Is that right? Yeah. Are you old enough? Excuse my ignorance. I can see a photo of you, so maybe the answer's no. But you're probably not quite old enough, are you, to really remember ABBA?
I'm old enough.
Oh, okay. Oh, well,
I do remember ABBA very well.
Yeah, they were wonderful. It's interesting, isn't it, that when you hear songs like that. So I know we're slightly digressing here, but when you hear songs like that, when I heard that, I felt happy.
Yeah. In fact, I'll tell you an interesting story. I once did some work. I do workshops with people who are going through some tough times, and I did some work for Bear Cottage here in Sydney. And this is a group that supports really tragic situations where young people are dying. Young kids are dying, and one of the women that I was working with, one of the mothers, said that whenever she felt things were just outside her control, that's what she listened to. She listened to Dancing Queen.
Wow.
I thought, what an amazing story that can lift your mood like that.
But it's interesting, isn't it, how music, in such a way, like that particular song, can do that. I mean, obviously there are other songs that bring you down. That's obvious, but there's only a few, really, when you think about it. There's only a few that really strike a chord with how we feel. Yeah, no, it's most interesting. So how did you start Factor C, first and foremost? And then maybe, Graeme, if you can just give us an overview as to what Factor C is.
Yeah, sure. Well, it really, I guess the original story was going through my own mental health crisis. I worked in a senior leadership position, and there was a market crash, and I crashed, and I was out of work for probably about 5 years. It was a very, very tough and devastating time.
Yeah.
And that led to me writing a series of books called Back from the Brink, and in that I interviewed people who'd been through some tough times, and I also surveyed over 4,000 people to find out what helped them to bounce back. And that led to me, becoming a speaker and talking about things. And the evolution of Factor C just came from a desire to really scale what I was doing, because you're always limited doing live presentations to how much time you can have.
Of course, yeah.
And I work with an e-learning specialist and it's just a 20-minute online course that after people do the 20 minutes, 93% say they're more confident to help someone who's going through a tough time. And it's just really about 3 things. It's about helping to identify someone who's going through a tough time, knowing how to ask, are you okay, with empathy, and also then to guide them to the right help, whether that be a mental health savvy GP or a psychologist or a helpline or whatever. So that's it in a snapshot, really. Yeah,
is that the We Care?
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
it is.
yeah. And it's such an interesting topic, isn't it? What you say to someone, how you say it, whether or not you identify that someone is perhaps unwell. And I can remember when I was at Channel 10 as a sports presenter, I was there from 96 through until 3 years ago. I can remember a number of times thinking, I was having terrible trouble, so I guess in a lot of ways I could sort of identify certain traits. And some people would be just sad because it was circumstantial, they might have had a fight with their wife or, or had a bit of an issue driving in. But others who I identified as perhaps being a little more melancholy, even though I was sort of there and understood it, I still didn't quite know what to say. That's such an important part, isn't it? Because if you You know, if you say the right thing, then the conversation can continue. But if you don't say the right thing, it can sort of end abruptly, and in the end, you don't help the person.
Yeah, and you know, I think it's also recognising, particularly men are particularly comfortable talking about it. You know, there's a sense of shame. There's a sense that you should be able to sort it out by yourself. And but this really approach just really encourages lots of open-ended questions because, you know, people feel more likely to share what's going on if they feel understood. And I think also where we ask the question as well, you know, when we're face-to-face with someone, it's not always the best. But if we're walking in a park or, you know, along in nature and that sort of thing, somehow when we're shoulder to shoulder, sometimes that increases the probability that someone will open up. And it's not always, they won't always share everything that's going on first up, and that's why it's very important to just keep asking open-ended questions and just trying to really help them feel understood, because if they feel understood, and I speak from first-hand experience, you know, you feel more likely to follow what they suggest or to you know, be that to be, you know, say doctor or call a helpline or whatever.
Absolutely. And look, I want to follow that thread in a second, but if we can just go back a sec, I just wanted to, if it's okay, just to drill down a little bit. So you were out of work for 5 years. That's, I mean, that in its, I know people have been out of work for 5 years and longer, I understand that, but when you've been working and then you're out of work for 5 years, that must have been really, really tough.
Yeah, it really was devastating. And when you're out of work that long, it just seems like Mount Everest to try and get back. It really does. Because you've, thankfully, I had, you know, income protection insurance, and so I wasn't financially decimated. But, you know, it led to lots and lots of personal difficulties of, you know, marriages breaking down and losing jobs and that sort of thing. But you know, the reason I am so passionate about talking about it and breaking down the stigma is that we can recover and we can lead a really, really good life. And I think that, if anything, you know, I lead a better life now because I've changed priorities and get a lot of reward out of helping people and helping to break down stigma.
Okay, so the little light bulb went off in my head again. You've changed priorities. Can you expand on that?
Well, I was very, very, you know, before my breakdown, I was very work-focused. And I often focused on work and worked, you know, ridiculous hours at the expense of personal relationships, and even my health. Now, if you told me that, you know, staying physically fit and having friends was important, I would have said, yeah, for sure. But if it came to picking between work or relationships, work often won. And I think that was a real mistake. And so, you know, I talk about, you know, three elements of well-being now: our vitality, our physical health, intimacy, which is our emotional health, and prosperity, which is our contribution health. And I really recommend people act like a VIP. Yeah. And what that means is that you do a bit for your physical health, your emotional health, and contribution health each day, and that helps to, you know, be a scaffolding if you go through a tough time again.
Oh wow, that is so valuable. I just want to pick one of those topics that you mentioned in there, intimacy. First of all, expand on that, and then I have a couple of questions about that. Well, I think what's really telling is the longest wellbeing study ever done is something called the Harvard Grant Study. And it followed 250 people for over 75 years. And the one thing they conclude after all that time is that the best predictor of a long life, a happy life, a low-stress life, and also an affluent life was having caring and supportive relationships around you. And, you know, I think it's fair to say that I had quite superficial relationships before my breakdown, but I really make a conscious effort every single week to catch up with people that are good for me. And, you know, and it's not just enough to see them regularly. You have to have a great time with them. You have to do it consistently. But you also have to be able to talk about, you know, your worries and your vulnerability. And I learned that the hard way that, you know, doing that ultimately is a win-win for everyone. Yeah, and I understand completely when you say that, you know, you had a lot of friends, but they weren't close friends. I think that's probably all of us in a lot of ways. I suppose it depends on what job you do, but if you're stuck in an office sort of thing, working on software and you've got that job because you're an introvert anyway, then you may not have too many friends. But I think most people have got a lot of people they know, but only probably a handful, hey, Graeme, that they can sit down and say, you know what, I want to talk to you about something really personal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's probably, could be just 2, 3 or 4 that fit into that category. And, when I do my seminars, I say, well, do you see those people enough? Because they're people that have your best interests at heart. And often the busyness of life, we can let that go. But my emphasis is it's too important to let that slip. It really is.
And just in regard to the intimacy, how important is physical intimacy to one's mental health?
Really important, having, a loving partner and all that, things, physical touch and that sort of thing is essential, really. Some people don't have that, and it doesn't mean that they can't have a good life and a happy life, but even if it's a close friend, a platonic friend, but you can just, just have a really sincere and a fun time with them.
Yeah.
That's important.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess the obvious sort of follow-up question to that, though, is if you don't have a physical, intimate relationship with someone, what are you actually missing out on from a mental health and a health point of view? Are you able to quantify that?
It's a little bit outside my direct area of expertise, but I think that, the research does show that if you are in a happy relationship, you're going to have a better life, and that usually implies an intimate relationship as well. It doesn't mean that if you're without a partner, you can't have a great life as well, but I think it just makes it more complete if you do have that. Yeah,
absolutely. We're talking to Graeme Cowen, who runs Factor C, and we're talking about mental health in the workplace, mental health in general. Probably a tricky question to ask, but do you feel as though enough businesses, and we're talking CEOs and people who run those businesses, do you feel as though enough of them are doing enough for their staff, as far as mental health and wellbeing is concerned, Graeme?
Traditionally not, I would say. There's of course exceptions, and I would always say that it's in the nice to have category for many, many organisations, but funnily enough, since this COVID-19 crisis, I would say it's gone up the ranks in terms of its importance because, there is a lot of people are stressed by the isolation, the uncertainty, the fear of unemployment or actual unemployment. And so I would say it has grown a bit. And I would also hope that it will help to make workplace a little bit more caring and human. I think there was all this hype about technology and artificial intelligence, but at the end of the day, it's people that deliver results for organisations, and working together and well is central to that. Yeah,
it's interesting. I mean, that seems so obvious, doesn't it? But it just doesn't seem to happen, and it's so blatant, it's so obvious with some companies where I had an interesting conversation with a guy about 18 months ago. I posted something up on LinkedIn, and I was very, very I was quite frenetic with posts at that time, and most of them were about mental health and a few other bits and pieces. Anyway, he rang me, and I didn't even know him. He's from your neck of the woods. He's from Sydney, and he runs a real estate company, and he just asked me if I was okay, and I said, yeah, thank you, that's very kind of you. He said, I just saw that last post, and he said, I just wasn't sure whether you're okay, and he said, I just wanted to make sure. So we had a chat for about 15, 20 minutes, Graeme, and he's got a company, I can't remember the name of it exactly, I'm sure it's a real estate business, and he's flipped the entire paradigm. So instead of sort of, the most important thing in this business is money, and then it goes down the chain, he's flipped it. So the most important thing in his business is him. Now, immediately people might go, well, that's pretty selfish. But no, he needs to look after himself so that he can then look after the second most important thing in his business, which is his staff. The next important thing is his clients, because if his staff are looked after by him, then the staff will look after the clients, which means the clients will then bring in the money. And I thought it was fascinating. But when you think about it, it's logical. But not many people do it. And that is really, that is, if you like, under the umbrella in a lot of ways of mental health and well-being, isn't it?
Very much so, and probably a famous example of that is Richard Branson and Virgin. He says, if you take care of your staff, I'll take care of your customers, and you can't take care of your staff if you're not in good shape yourself. And so one of my real messages is that self-care isn't selfish. Keeping yourself in good shape means that you're able to look after other people.
Absolutely. Yeah, spot on, Graeme. That's exactly right. So, in a general sense, when you're asked to go into an organisation and talk to them about mental health, what are some of the more recurring questions and topics that you're asked about?
Yeah, one of the things I really focus on is really prevention, and that's really creating the right team environment where you don't have those issues in the first place. That's the first thing. And I think, I really say that your first priority is to take care of yourself, to take care of your team, but then also know how to help each other. And so some of the, recurring questions that I get are along the lines of, I think Brian is not okay, but he keeps saying he is. What do you suggest I do?
Oh, yeah, good point.
That's a real one around denial. And I, in response to that, I say, well, he may not be ready to talk to you, but do you know someone else that he's close to? Can you have a word with them?
Good idea.
To see if they can reach out.
Good idea of getting around that. Yeah.
It is. And also, thinking about, don't be afraid to revisit it and to come back and try again, because sometimes it's not the first or the second, but it can be the third or the fourth time when you're asked, are you okay, that it can make a real difference.
Graeme, I'm really enjoying this. In a lot of ways, I think fundamentally we're talking about staff here. Well, perhaps we are, perhaps we aren't, but I get the feeling that we are. But what about if it's someone who's higher up the ranks? How does that work?
Well, it doesn't discriminate.
No.
That's the thing, Mark. It doesn't discriminate. And there's been several examples of very senior people, and I think of people like, and this goes back a few years, but Jeff Gallup, who was formerly the Premier of West Australia.
Absolutely, yeah.
He stepped down, and he's his closest colleague. I think of also John Brogden in New South Wales, who was the opposition leader, and he famously stepped down. So it doesn't discriminate, and I've heard many bosses say, I welcome being asked, are you okay? Because it's sometimes it's tough being in charge and trying to lead with optimism when things can be quite difficult. So everyone, what I've learned in sharing my story is that most people have a story, whether it's about them or someone close to them that's been through a tough time. And often when you share your story, it gives people permission to share their story. And the more that people do share their story, the more that stigma is broken down, and there can be more meaningful and positive conversations about mental health.
Do you feel that people who are in positions of power are even more reluctant to say something?
Well, I think, it's the whole ego thing of, I can't show weakness, or I can't. But I think that is really changing, Mark. I think that, it used to be this whole concept of command and control, and, the boss is the all-knowing person. But because things are changing so quickly. There's no way that any one person can be across everything. And often the most impressive bosses say, well, actually, I don't know the answer to that. What do you think?
Delegate. Delegate or ask.
Delegate and ask other people for suggestions. And, that's the way you get the best answer, is looking at diverse responses, working through the pros and cons of all the possibilities and then making the best choice.
As a result of the wonderful work you're doing, I really admire people who are in your position who are doing things that really for this planet should have been done many, many, many years ago, because without our mental health, we got nothing.
Yeah.
But with your work, that sounded terrible, nothing, you know what I mean. My grandmother would have pulled me up on, it's nothing. It's not nothing. It's nothing. Bless her. As a result of the work that you've done, have you had enough time, and have you got the resources to have done some research and some stats that you're able to sort of continue to build on?
Yeah, and as I mentioned, with this 20-minute eye care course, we found out that 93% of people feel more confident to help someone after completing their course.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So that's really, really heartening. But we're also looking at some academic alliances to really measure long-term impact, and if you can actually change behaviour and change culture of organisations, because at the end of the day, if it doesn't turn into a better culture, well, what bothers sort of thing? Ultimately, you want something that is more sustainable and better in the long run.
Now, it's interesting that you mentioned culture. And look, I'm very cognizant of your time, so if it's okay, I might just ask 2 or 3 more questions. And thank you again, Graeme. You mentioned culture. I take it that culture is linked to what you do. Culture is linked to mental health and well-being within an organisation.
Yeah, very much so, because ultimately culture is determined by the behaviour of senior leaders that then sprinkles down through middle managers to frontline people. And changing behaviour changes culture. And most people, in my experience, want to provide the right sort of environment, but they don't know exactly how to do it. And they don't also necessarily realise that, having more supportive and teams where everyone is asked to contribute delivers better results. There's a very famous study of Google, and they found out that the number one predictor of their best teams is where there is strong team psychological safety. And what that means is that in a team situation, everyone contributes approximately equal in the meeting. It doesn't mean it's a democracy, but people feel heard and they feel involved in the direction setting. And that's the sort of environment that's required in a really rapidly changing environment. So more leaders are realising this, and I think that's a very heartening element.
And just as an extension to that, people feel happier when they feel connected. Is that similar to what you just said?
100%. I say to leaders, you should be asking yourself 3 questions all the time. The questions are, do we feel connected? I'm talking about your team. Do we feel safe? By that I mean psychological safety, where people feel they can make suggestions and contributions and not be shot down. Yeah. And then do we have a shared future? So do people feel that they're part of the direction setting of the future of the team and the business sort of thing? So they're 3 areas that good leaders I think are asking much more regularly these days.
Do you walk into an organisation and get an instant feel whether it's good, bad, or indifferent?
You can sense that very, very quickly. You sense an energy or a vibe for sure. And, before I was involved in this work, I was in recruitment. And so I go into lots of organisations. And you can get a feel for sure.
Yeah.
And you walk into the foyer and they'd have these, wonderful value statements up on the wall, but the next week someone from that organisation would come in and tell you how much it sucks.
That's very good. I like that. You get those organisations where the boss runs around telling everyone that it's a brilliant place to work and it's got a great culture. He tells everyone that, but everyone else tells everyone else that it's shit. You know what I mean?
The real story.
Yeah, and what worries me about that, Graeme, is, and I'm fascinated by this stuff, what worries me is either the boss is lying or he's dumb. So either way, he can't win. Do you know what I mean? Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But before you leave us, perhaps just a quick tip. So, if someone's listening now and they work in an organisation and there's someone that they feel is just a little bit off or whatever, if you were just offering them something, what would you say to the person that is concerned about that other person? What should they do, Graeme?
Yeah, it's a great question. And on our website, blacktosea.com.au, there's something there called How to Support a Teammate in Distress. And what it is, it's a acronym, I CARE. So I is for identify. It's knowing, when you see change in behaviour, change in mood, change in circumstances. C is for compassion. And so it's asking, are you okay with empathy? A is for access experts. Encourage them to see their GP or call a helpline or take one little step in the right direction. R is for revitalising work, and work is actually good for our recovery. So people are better off being connected to their workmates than being at home by themselves staring at the ceiling. And then E is for exercise. Encourage them to have at least a 30-minute walk each day. So that poster is on the website there.
Got it. Yeah, I got it. I'm looking at it now. It's a ripper. It's a ripper. Yeah, that is sensational. Yeah, the We Care program follows the I Care framework. Yeah, this has been really, really well put together. It just hasn't been smashed together. That's for sure. There's a lot of thought gone into this. It's and then there's the We Care e-learning course is designed too, and then it goes in to help people to identify someone who is struggling, know how to ask, are you okay, with empathy, and guide people to the help they need. Hey, just before you go, Graeme, did you have something to do with Are You OK Day?
Yes, I'm a board director of Are You OK?
Yeah.
So, I've been there on the journey right from the start when
Good on
Gavin Larkin started it.
Good on you.
It's wonderful to see how that's grown and expanded.
I do have one criticism.
What's that?
Don't panic. It's not a bad one. I think it should be Are You OK Day every day.
Yeah, well, that's really our mission, to go Are You OK 365.
Yeah.
We will always have one day of the year as a point of focus.
Of course.
But that's our real mission now, is to get people to embrace it every single day.
Thank you for chatting to us. Before you go, the website again?
factorsea.com.au.
And can they ring as well if they want to? Or do it through the website?
Yeah, do it through a website. There's a form there for further information or what have you.